It might be the headphones.
Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here. This is the first session of Seeking
One
Sacred
for me.
Understanding with Rabbi Joe.
You've got the other
Bear
ones
with
here.
me a second. Okay. We're going to ask you to mute if you're talking on your end. Um, we have Tushta Krishna Das with us as our first guest, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you for being here. Um, Rabbi, why don't you go and you can introduce Tushta Das a little bit more fully.
Yeah, I'm probably going to allow him to do that, but I just
Okay.
want to first and foremost say to you and Neil, and if you had to get clearance with the other board members, I want to just thank you for this opportunity, which is so beautiful that you're allowing us to come into your sacred house, our sacred house as Jews, and to bring in other faith traditions that have wisdom and light and beauty so that we can learn about the other. And to be honest, it's a calling that I have had for years to study the other and to be in dialogue with the other. It's what I seek regularly to do because my understanding of myself, my place in the world, even my way of being Jewish has been so deeply enhanced by studying other wisdom traditions and learning from other guides. So thank you for allowing me this luxury of and this gift, giving me the gift of being able to share in dialogue with everybody here. It's a real blessing. So thank you all again for allowing me to do this.
Well, thank you, Rabbi, because it's a gift to the rest of us that you're doing this, and we
Thank you.
truly, truly appreciate it.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
it's
and I
great.
know everybody here is gonna really add to our our understanding, I hope, about life and self. And I hope we have new discoveries. My goal for all of this is that we don't just leave understanding another faith tradition and respect them more. My hope is that we leave with the realization that there is so much that I didn't know about them that I thought I did, and now I have more insight into myself and into life so that I can live better with other human beings. So, with that, my friend Tushta, why don't you give us a little background about just your position? We'll go into specifics, but who are you? What are you representing here? And then we'll get into some of the beauty and the depth of what I know everybody's going to hear tonight and receive.
Okay, well, pleasure to be here with you all, coming together. And this is the call of the hour for thoughtful essence seekers to come together and to have the sacred in the center, something that's missing so much in the world. So yeah, presently I serve here at the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. I serve as my wife and I, we serve as co-presidents at the temple here. I came here in 2009. And then before that, in 1992, just after college, I was backpacking around the country and I spent time studying in the sister ashram that used to be up in Boulder. So I spent a few years up there in 92. And yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of my journey in Krishna, in bhakti, Krishna consciousness, yoga. Yeah, the journey kind of started just briefly in high school, freshman, sophomore year, starting to read some authors like Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. We read Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, George Orwell's Animal Farm in 1984, and Hermann Hesse's classic Siddhartha. So yeah, just as a teenager in school, reading books for class assignments, but as a few of us, a couple of my friends, as we were reading these books, we started to see that there was a little deeper message. And I wasn't raised with any particular religion, so I think just exploring some of the literature that I started experiencing in high school opened me up to philosophy, humanity, spirituality. And then, yeah, towards my junior, senior year, started to explore meditation, yoga. I picked up the Bible for my first time. And then in college, I took a short break and I traveled the country with some Lakota elders from the indigenous tradition, the Lakota from the Midwest. And it was a walk protest the nuclear testing on the Shoshone land in Nevada. So yeah, getting into environmental activism, human rights. And then from there, just kind of the doors just started opening up more and more and more. And for my particular evolution in life, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhakti tradition resonated with me. And so I felt it was a dynamic, you can say, synthesis of the various disciplines and traditions I was studying, and dedicated myself to this Krishna Bhakti path since 1992. And here we are a few years later, carrying on as a aspiring servant of the servant.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Let's start with a very basic, but I think there'll be some very deep insights into this question. Simply, your name. Is your name just given? Is it random? In the ancient world of faiths, all of the ancient faiths, names aren't simply what you're called. They are given as a calling. So I know in Judaism this is the way, and it's the way of all ancient poetic faiths. Hinduism, and we'll discuss that term in a few moments.
Sure.
But Hinduism is an ancient faith with ancient wisdom, and I'm certain that naming isn't just like it is today. I called him John because I like the sound of the name. What's the significance of naming in the Hindu tradition? And what is the significance and meaning behind your name? How were you given a name and by whom?
Yeah, so my birth name, my birth legal name is Takayuki Sato. I was born in Japan, so name given by my mother and father. And then when I took to this bhakti path, then at a certain point of one's discipline, when one feels called and ready to commit to their initiation vows, then the teacher, in my case, I have a spiritual master. We have several teachers, and normally a prominent one that one connects with is called the Diksha Guru. And that person, during the initiation ceremony, then gives a name at the time of initiation. And so for the ladies, the last part of the name will be Dasi, and then for men, Das. So Das means servant. It's the most important part of the name. So I was given the name Tushta Krishna Das. So Tushta means satisfaction. So one who is Das, one who is satisfied, serving God, or one who is satisfied, serving Krishna, or one who is a servant of that satisfied Lord. So the idea is that by service to God, this is the formula for satisfaction. So it's a counter to what Mick Jagger wrote. You can't find no satisfaction. So we challenge that in serving God, one can get satisfaction. So Tushta Krishna Das basically means one servant, one who is satisfied in service to God.
Beautiful. I knew there was going to be a rich insight there. Let's move on to now the name of your faith tradition. The deeper sense of the name, not just what it's called and who it's named after, but give us some insights into and a few other insights into the other names of Krishna.
Yeah. Well, one thing I like to start with is upon my kind of beginning chapters of my spiritual journey, one aspect that I reflect on is that I wasn't raised with a religion. So when I started studying various traditions, both from around the world, I came to a point that I wasn't so much interested in picking one particular religion and just affiliating with just a label of a religion. So even though I've been on this path for over the past 30 years, historically a tradition coming out of India, and then there's the Sanskrit, the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna, this name of God, which means all attractive. So it's very much India, for some very much Hindu. But what attracted me was when I learned about this term dharma. and particularly Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means eternal, and Dharma means the essential quality. Some people will translate it as one's vocation or occupation, that essential quality. So, for example, the Dharma of sugar, we would say, is its sweetness. The Dharma of fire is heat. The Dharma of water is its liquidity. So I was very attracted to this principle of Dharma because it related to the essential nature of our being beyond our gender, political affiliation, even religious affiliation. It dealt with that essential self, what we call the Atma, the soul, the spirit. And so in this bhakti tradition, many times they'll refer to it as a sect of Hinduism. Hinduism is more of a contemporary term. It's more of a geographical, cultural term of the land of India, Hindustan, the place of Hindus, Hinduism, that place which is represented by people practicing Hinduism. So it's more of a geographical, cultural term, whereas the actual spirituality is rooted in this principle of Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. And then yoga, which we all have heard of, it's a little bit more than, there's the stretching and everything, but that's a branch of it. But this word yoga means that union, that connection of the self and divinity, God, and that union, and whatever discipline that one is engaged in, that union is called yoga. So just a little premise for the name. And Krishna, in one sense, God is beyond a name, we would say. And at the same time, in the bhakti tradition, we understand that God is unlimited, ananta. Ananta means unending. And in that sense, just like the waves of the ocean, just unlimited, they keep coming and coming. So God is similarly unlimited, and therefore, because of that unlimited nature, then there's unlimited ways to express, express the qualities. So Krishna means all attractive. So that source that attracts everything and everyone. It's that source of attraction. And whatever we experience in this world as far as attraction, maybe going to the Grand Canyon, maybe music, maybe attraction to power or wealth or musical abilities or food. There's so many things that attract us, smells, sights, sounds. So that attraction on the physical platform is quite, external. It's quite limited. When we start to experience attraction on the platform of soul, then naturally that starts to go towards something much more greater, much more grand than just even, let's say, the Grand Canyon, which is an incredible manifestation of God's creation. So what to say of the creator, the source? So Krishna means all attractive, one who possesses all attractive qualities. And therefore, we experience attraction in this world with things in one another and the elements.
So you've mentioned a few terms. You mentioned yoga from yug, which is union, and bhakti, the idea of devotion as a practice. So in Hinduism, there's the way of works, there's the way of knowledge, and there's the way of devotion or humble service, which would be bhakti. I'd like you to go into the idea of bhakti as a way of service, and
Yes.
maybe even exploring the term bhakti a little more. And when in your description of Krishna as that root about attractive, the all attractive one, why then, if Krishna is all encompassing, anatta, right? Why aren't we as creations of the all attractive one? Why aren't we drawn to or attracted to the one who is always calling? So bhakti and Krishna, and why aren't we attracted to the all attractive one?
Yeah. So regarding bhakti and service, there's a beautiful verse in the ancient text of Bhagavad Gita. This was the epic dialogue within the history of India called the Mahabharata. And this is where Krishna speaks to Arjuna. And in the 6th chapter, Krishna says the perfect yogi, so the one who's perfected in yoga, he says to Arjuna, the perfect yogi, in comparison to oneself, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress. So the perfect yogi, in comparison to oneself, sees the true equality in all beings in both their happiness and distress. So the reason I'm referring to this verse is that spirit of service, which is innate for the soul, it ties in with empathy. So if one sees someone, maybe if one has gone through whatever situations of happiness or distress, then there's more of a sensitivity. There's a little bit more empathy when others are perhaps going through a certain situation. So then the spirit of service, of compassion, what we call titikshava, there's tolerance, karunika means compassion. So one who's on that path of holiness, they're attracted to this quality of the soul, which is to serve. Now, in order to be in that current of service, we can only do that if we're recognizing that we're the Atma, because if we're only thinking we're this body or this mind, and that's what I identify with, then what will be prominent is not service, but what can I get? What can I exploit for my economic, sensual, emotional agenda? If I'm only just identifying just with this body, then my body has these senses or the mind, whatever it might be, then it would be very difficult for me to be in that spirit of selfless service or bhakti, right? Shuddha bhakti, pure bhakti means pure devotional service. So when we recognize that, oh, I have this body, which is a gift of God, I have this mind, this intellect, and I'm an Atma, I'm a soul, same in quality as the Supreme Soul, as God, same in quality, but I'm a minute part, I'm a part and parcel of that whole. And my inherent nature is to serve that complete whole. I'm a unit of consciousness coming from that source. And my inherent nature is to serve. Nitya Siddha, Krishna Prema, love of God, it's eternally situated within the heart. Now, this point of how is it that, did you say that many humans are resistant or ignoring the reality of service to God?
From the draw, the all-encompassing, infinite aspect of the one who draws.
Yeah, like a magnet.
We're not drawn into. So what happens to us? And yes, thank you. If I don't see the hands, Yael, you watch my hands, the hand motions for questions. Yes, Sherry?
Where's that? Oh, sorry.
I first of all, thank you so much for all your explaining. I love hearing this. And I'm just so curious, like, what you talk about being of service. I can really relate to that. And I feel like there are some people who just really naturally, embody that and feel that. And my question is, do you feel like that is something that is a natural sort of inherent thing for all people?
Well, it's inherent within the soul, but when the soul, because we have this minute independence, the jiva, the living entity, does have this minute independence. So when we ignore, due to the ahankar, what we call the false ego, then it's kind of like dust and grease getting on that mirror, or rust. It's like rust, and no longer that connection is like showing. And at that point, it almost seems as though certain persons, one might even think that person does not have any sacred qualities of service. They're simply have an agenda to exploit, to hurt, to take, to dominate, to harass, to subjugate. And it's almost like, it seems that it can be so dark sometimes how certain individuals they come to a place along life's journey where they really turn to such a dark space. So it's a very covered over. We would say they're very covered over by the illusory energy. And so therefore, when they start to identify so much with only the material designations, then the tendency is then to want to exploit in whatever way. And therefore, we have situations of people who become very abusive, or they want to harm others, or they judge very violently according to maybe someone's external affiliation, whether ethnic or gender or religious or economic. And such persons can also come to a turning point of awakening and start to clear that dust, those layers, through, and depending on the tradition, what we would call sadhana, through sadhana, which means our practice, and through grace, through kripa, through mercy. Both are there to then start to purify the mirror of the heart, cheto darpana marjanam, that the recitation of God's holy name has so much power that it can cleanse the mirror of the mind and heart. So then one can again awaken to that dormant inherent nature, which is service to God and service to the environment around us. And as you mentioned, it can get so covered over that the inherent qualities seems like it's no longer there. Like it's that fire is so, that little spark, it's so covered over. And so the idea of grace, of holy company, of the divine holy names is like a fan. And it starts to fan, that spark, and suddenly a flame starts coming out. I'm like, whoa, like there was a flame in my heart, or in that person even. How did that happen? And it's magical. We've experienced our own transformation, and we've also seen that transformation in others. And as circumstances are there, there's some who just choose to stay covered and choose to not turn to the light, as they say.
Thank you so much.
Is the covering, today's dialogue isn't so much we're not exploring some of the similarities and divergences. That's not our purpose of other faith traditions, but I think it's relevant here. In some faith traditions, well, from the way you're describing it, it sounds like it's a covering of self rather than an outside source or force covering us up. Am I understanding that right? Or is it possibly both within the Hindu vision, that we become something other by choice, or is there a force out there that is tempting, an all-attractive one drawing us away, just like the all-attractive one drawing us towards?
Yeah. Well, we call that the Maya Shakti. So the Maya Shakti is the illusory potency of Krishna, of God. It's that illusory potency, that curtain that covers one over. So yes, it's both within ourselves. Due to my own ahankar, or my false ego, and my attachments, then the determination to stay on that path of yoga, that path of bhakti, becomes very weakened, because I've chosen to put where attention goes, energy flows. So I've chosen to put my attention towards a certain way of life, to certain behaviors. And sure, we can say, all right, I've got a lot of trauma from my youth that's influenced my behavior, issues with my parents, abandonment, or whatever it might be, right? And we can blame all those things, but ultimately, there's radical responsibility. We have accountability to then honor our potential to go through this process of transformation. And yes, it is very difficult in certain circumstances with certain individuals because of life situations, and it could almost sometimes seem impossible. And we would say that whatever they left off from past life, everyone has a particular curriculum. We all have a particular curriculum that we'll go through, and everyone has the potential for transformation. And as you mentioned, Joe, I liked what you said. Like if we use our minute free will, I can use my two legs and my arms in this gift that Krishna, that God has given me, and I can use it to, walk down and whatever, just go to Colfax and get some drugs, or I can use it for so many things that will just keep covering me over. The covering will just get thicker and thicker and thicker. Or I can use that free will then to go on pilgrimage and to come together and honor time to come together with others and discuss about God and spirituality. And so again, it's that minute free will, that minute independence.
I love yes, David. One second, David. Just let me just follow up on this, and then you are next. And this is open to questions also. Yes, thank you. Remember that question, Yael, because I'll forget it. Thank you, Sherry. One thing I just appreciate so much, and it echoes into the Jewish faith tradition and way, is the idea of awakening is not simply a process of enlightening the self. It has to, in some way, manifest that light within our lives, within our service, and that you seek to participate, as you said earlier, in the joys and in the grief through bhakti is just, it's so rich. And I wish we all had, we might have it in our tradition, but you have it so prominently in yours as a practitioner of bhakti. And I want you to go into bhakti as a type of sadhana, I guess is the term for practice, right? Explain what the term for practice is, and then explain a little more about bhakti. And then we will get, before we move on to a few other topics here of Maya, and we've got a lot of terminology here that we've got to get into before we go into the depths, so to speak. This is just tilling the soil and giving us the vision in the background so that we can then enter into the depths. But give us a sense of what does it mean to practice bhakti in the sense of sadhana and bhakti. What are the insights that we can learn from those terms that will deepen our own practice? And by the way, Anne, you were same idea when you said in Christianity it was the false self. That's exactly what he said, the false ego. So again, there's more harmony here of ideologies. So thank you, Krishna, and I mean Tushta. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, this point that you addressed just right now, before bhakti, you were asking about what was the first part? Just
sadhana, practice.
Sadhana. Yeah, I just heard one
practice of bhakti. What does it mean, practice?
Yeah, one bhakti practitioner, one associate of mine from England, he shared a nice principle of sadhana, that the highest wealth, sadhana, dana means wealth. So the greatest wealth we could have is our daily practice. Wow. And the idea of this sadhana is it gets one in a routine, a regulation, because without regulation, it's easy just to start to act very whimsically. So for example, in my personal life, and for individuals it differs, but rising at a certain time in the morning, dedicating a certain amount of time, whether it's with prayer or I have service at the temple, we have also our prayer beads. We do what's called japa, chanting this Maha Mantra, this Hare Krishna mantra. We have a certain time where we study scripture. And so it allows for the body and the mind then to have a certain routine to be in that sacred space regularly. And through that regular practice, then gradually it will come to a point which is called rag. So there's the Vaidhi sada. Vaidhi means rules and regulations. It's in one sense externally quite mechanical. And then there's rag, which means spontaneous. So the simple example is, I grew up playing soccer. So in the beginning, I might have just been kicking a ball around in the backyard. And then I joined a team. There was a coach. there's drills, there's cones, then there's even rules in the game. There's like the boundaries, there's the goal. And so it's quite organized, and at the same time it became more fun so at first it's a lot of drills, and after 5, 10, by the time I was in high school, my movements were so like spontaneous, it actually became really fun. But I was able to experience the fun and the flow and the grace because there was years of sadhana, you can say, practice. And so similarly, the sadhana is to support one to get to that point of spontaneity. Now, some people just want to, hey, just love God, just love God. So it's kind of like saying, yeah, I'm just gonna just get the ball and go on the field during the World Cup. That would be silly. It would be quite embarrassing, actually, and we would say kind of cheap. There's a term called sahaja, to take something sacred in a very cheap manner, just like, hey, I kicked the ball for 2 days. I'm going to jump on the field and play on the World Cup team. It would be silly. So similarly, for one to say like, yeah, I just want to love God, but without any sense of, you can say, discipline. Discipline has the word disciple in it.
Yeah.
So disciple means that there's discipline in one's life. Whereas today, sometimes even in the yoga tradition, even in the so-called bhakti tradition, I've experienced sometimes there can be like a sentimental, just love, just spirit. And at the same time, there's no sense of discipline in one's life, and anything goes. And I find that to be, I find it to be a little obnoxious, because it kind of cheapens the sacred value of these amazing ancient traditions, and just kind of makes it like, yeah, just whatever you want to do, just have sex with whoever, take whatever drugs, and yeah, I'm spiritual. I close my eyes for a few minutes and meditate, and it's as silly as like someone who just decides to kick a ball for 2 days and wants to play on a World Cup team. So sadhana, we would say then sadhana is that expression. Or, I'm married, so I could say like, yeah, I love you, dear wife, I love you, kids. And then I just kind of like hang out. Like, yeah, I love you. Yeah, I really love you. Yeah, I really love you. But where's the service? Where's the action? And of course, it's not only by action. It's not only by service only. It's a combination of the feeling, the heart, the devotion, the grace, and also there's discipline. There's discipline in relationships. There's discipline in taking care of our health. There's so many different disciplines in this world. So how would that relationship with God not also have an element of discipline?
So, Sherry, we're going to get to your question as far as practice in a few moments. I just want to get some breadth before we get into the specific practice, but absolutely, we're going there as far as meditational practices and other ritual practices. Before you go into bhakti, and just explain a little more about the nature of that devotional service, you mentioned the idea of discipline, a disciplined practice, a regular way of living. How we have this in Judaism too? We have a very disciplined practice. And in fact, one of the terms we use as part of our code of law is called Orach Chaim, which is the way of life. Our practice is a way of life. Jewish law is called halacha, which comes from the root of walking, meaning how we walk through life, how we live. The struggle that we often encounter in Judaism, I'm looking for your help in this for a way out. We often turn our disciplined practice, our disciplined devotion into rote action, empty outward action. We have ways to try and resensitize and deepen our practice, but I'd be curious, how do you, in your faith that has a practice very grounded in ritual, how do you keep the discipline from turning into rote action?
That's an excellent question, and such an inspiring question that a sincere practitioner of bhakti would want to ask that question every morning upon getting up. They would, because once we don't ask that question to ourselves, if we forget to ask that question upon getting up, most likely the so-called sadhana that day will be rote. It will be mechanical. It will be mechanical, and even sometimes we'll start to think of it as a burden.
Yeah.
It'll feel like a galag. It'll feel like a heavy rock. It'll feel like a heavy rock. So your point is so significant that this is what we ask. So in the morning when we get up, we have these beautiful prayers that we recite, and those can become mechanical too, because they're easy to say, but they're meant to kind of purify the consciousness, to reawaken ourselves every morning that I'm a servant of the servant of the servant. And so how I move in this world is that I'm a servant. But even that can become mechanical. I'm a servant. I'm here to serve. And it's so easy to say mechanically. So therefore, the sankalpa, what we call the intention, every morning, before any ritual is done, before any discipline or practice, before going onto the field, so to say, we take a moment to really, at least I know for myself, I need to do it. Otherwise, the services, the ritual, even the prayers on the beads, it could just become like, all right, I got this many done. Put the beads down, now I can do whatever the hell I want. It's it can just become like that. So how am I setting my sankalpa, or what we call our intention? And as you're saying, there's practitioners, people who are members, and whether it's our bhakti tradition or in other traditions, if they're not doing that, it's very likely that many times it's just a nominal designation. The involvement in the religious practice could just be a nominal designation versus an experience of substance, of essence.
So what's one practice? Like in Judaism, it's very interesting you're using the word intention. We try to keep an intentional awareness, a kavana, we call it in Hebrew. We try to keep that, and that root word also means to direct. It means we have to redirect or direct our intentions back within, so that we can focus on recovering what has often been lost, which is the deeper aspect of self. And one practice that we awaken with, and we have a few Jewish folks in the audience who I know have a religiously based practice. We awaken with a prayer called Maida, gratitude prayer. And I don't know if anybody's going to admit to it, so I won't call on them, but if you ask most people privately how they say that prayer immediately upon awakening, it's about, I might be dating myself here, but it's about the speed that Evelyn Wood used to teach you how to read, speed reading. You can read a page like this. You know, Woody Allen said a joke, I think I told it once. He said he took a speed reading course and he read War and Peace in 2 hours. It was about war. That's pretty much what we get out of half of our prayers, because it's my day. Lovely. I am so not transformed. It's a prayer about gratitude, and we are going at the speed of light, where everything just stops. So I taught my daughter from the earliest of years to sing it, to say it, to spend at least a minute or two awakening with gratitude. That's a foundational practice that helps us in our practice, in what you would call sadhana, in our halachic way of living. What's one other gift that you can offer us? I love that terminology, the idea it's the greatest wealth. That's the term for a practice. That is our greatest wealth. That's beautiful. That is so beautiful. Give us one practice that can help us come back a little to who we are.
Well, in the bhakti tradition, there is worship, there is prayer, there is study of scriptures, there's remembrance. And so for me, my practice of what I would call japa, it's our little, both japa and kirtan, but kirtan is where we get together with instruments and singing prayers, especially this Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then also on our prayer beads, which in the morning time or throughout the day or evening before I go to bed, having that sacred space time where I can really then enter into that communion. It's that communion time, that dialogue time, that intimacy with divinity, with God, with Krishna. And so through the name, through the name, and I would say that of all the practices and disciplines of yoga, of scripture, that it really is, for me as a practitioner in bhakti yoga, this is foundational, is really staying tuned in to the shelter of the name.
Shelter of the name. Beautiful. David, you had a question?
You have
Can't
to
hear.
unmute.
See, we try to do this to you in synagogue, David, and it doesn't work. But now it works when we want to hear from you. David's a friend, folks.
Look on the bottom. There you go. Look on the bottom left of your screen and see if you can hit audio so you can unmute yourself. Or you can press the space bar, David. We still can't hear you. Just press the space bar if you want to press the space bar.
Now, you just had it. Push it again. There you go. We can hear you now.
You can hear me now.
Yes.
Perfect.
It says mute. Okay. Well, there are tremendous similarities in intent and differences in technique in what you're saying with Judaism. Going a step further after you say Modeh Ani, which I say it every morning and I mean it. I am 87 years old and I thank God for giving me the privilege and grace to be able to wake up in the morning. But after that, we put on a tefillin. And the tefillin has three parts. One goes on your arm, the other on your head, and one on your hand. And the symbolism of that is what's in your heart and the principles that you're getting from the purity of your belief in God is what you should manifest in what you do with your hand. It's just the same, similar to what you were saying. But
Yes.
My questions were briefly, is Krishna, I'm not sure if Krishna is God, is Krishna an intermediary for God? What is Krishna?
We're going to get into all the gods in a moment. Promise.
Okay.
We're going to get into all the gods and all the specifics, but give us a brief little, and then what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Well, during your initial presentation, you used the word equal to Krishna. You're a small part of Krishna, and I didn't understand equal, what that means.
Yeah,
okay.
That's good. You're listening very careful. We're going to have all of that. I promise. I have a few questions here. Before we get into the specific nuances, I just want to give us a few more broad philosophical ideas so we can fit all of these nuances into a foundation. But those are wonderful questions. And did anybody else have any other questions? Hi, Faye. Nice seeing you. Anybody else before we continue? And before you continue with the meaning of bhakti, what does bhakti, ultimately, devotional service, mean?
Well, it's pretty complete in that translation, devotional service. So meaning that with our minds, with our bodies, with our hearts, our priority, our intention in this human form of life is to come to that point of selfless, loving service, selfless loving service. Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Nityera Krishna Das. Jivera Swarupa, the original form, the original Jivera Swarupa, the original form of the living entity, is that we're an eternal servant of God, or in our Bhakti tradition, eternal servant of Krishna.
Beautiful. You've mentioned several times scriptures. I know there is a large body of scriptures, of holy writ, holy writing or text in the Hindu tradition. They're divided up between the Shruti and the Smriti. Could you help us understand what these two bodies of literature are, and what is the nature of revelation, the scriptural holy writ? What is the nature of revelation? Does it come through an individual? Is it ongoing? Is it set? Is it fixed? But in those, so give us a few of the two different categories of scripture, Shruti and
Shrutis.
Smriti, and
Yeah.
then the nature of the revelation. Like where would the Upanishads fit? Where would the Bhagavad Gita fit in these
Yeah.
in these bodies?
Yeah, the Upanishads, original Vedic mantras, they would fall in the original, the Shrutis, the original, and the Smritis are you can say additional histories or Puranas. For example, Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, and further revelation, you can say, in relationship to the original Shruti. If Krishna Madhavan's on here, when he comes on next month, he can really unpack that technical concept a little bit even further. So yeah, the Upanishads, and there's 11 principal Upanishads. There's 108 further. There's 108 Upanishads. Out of those, there's 11 principal ones: the Ishopanishad, Svetashvatara Upanishad, etc. And those are original Vedic mantras. Those are original Vedic mantras, and then from there you have corollary scriptures, and you have what's called the itihasas. There's like histories, like the Ramayana, and further elaborations, and then further revelation, you can say, of the saints as well. And so that would be more in the field of Smriti.
And what exactly is Smriti as far as meaning, and what is Shruti, and what are, we're going to get into that in a moment, but you mentioned the Vedic or the Vedas and mantra. Before we get into it in more depth, just as since you've mentioned the terms, what do you mean the Upanishads are part of the original Shruti and that they're Vedic mantras?
Shruti is that which is heard. Shruti, that which is heard. Smriti is that which is remembered. And I'm not, these kind of more Vedic, like the Vedic paradigms of Shruti and Smriti, I haven't studied those particular areas as in depth as other who are a little bit more, have a grasp in Sanskrit. And in, you can say the Vedic canon. For me, my area of study has mostly been with some Upanishads, but mainly in the Bhakti tradition. We study the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a commentary on what we call the Vedanta Sutras. Sutras are aphorisms, and so it's a commentary on the original Vedic Sutras, and that became known as the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, which is a greater history of ancient India. It would be like a itihasa, a history. And then the Shrutis are the original mantras which were heard, which are heard, and the understanding is that they have no beginning and no end, and that they were learned through hearing. A disciple would hear it, and then they were called Shruti Dhar. Shruti Dhar means whatever one hears, they hold it, and they don't need to write anything down. They're able to completely assimilate it, and then in turn, they would pass it on to their students. So this is how the Vedas were taught. It was simply heard, Shruti Dhar. Then one would hold that, assimilate it, come to realization, and then continue to share it in a succession.
Beautiful. Kathy, I see you have a question.
You have to unmute yourself, Kathy.
I accidentally hit the hand button. I'm sorry.
Well, it was
I
nice
find
hearing
it
from you.
fascinating. I'm relating. It's making so much sense.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Sharon. There's a hand up on Sharon's too. Okay. Okay. Oh, is that?
David has a question.
I'm
David,
sorry.
David has
Yes.
very amazing questions, by the way.
Okay, well, you just used the word selfless service. I'd like to explore that a little further, because it seems like you can't be selfless. Your first responsibility is to yourself, and then so what do you mean by selfless? That's my question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very, very good question.
And
Exactly.
to set it up a little more broadly, because we also have Christians here, Jesus says in John that there's no greater love than to give your life for the sake of another. So that sounds like selfless service. We have a different principle in Judaism, but I want us to hear how you work with David's wonderful question. Where are you in that potential world of service and self?
And also, by the way, the two questions before, just I'm appreciating how tuned in you are to hearing and very refined in what you were pointing out in the earlier part of the presentation. So yes, selfless, meaning that one can serve God to get something. It's called sa kama. Kama means desire. So with desire. So I'm serving, but it's a business exchange. I'm going to do this so I can get something. And if I don't get that something, then perhaps that might, well, is God really there for me? So if it's just a business exchange, it's quite external. So selfless meaning that, am I just doing it to get some benefit? Okay, I'm going to go to God just so that then I can get some boons or some benedictions. Or there's a beautiful verse, Ashlis Shabdaratam Pinoshtamam Adarshanam. Whether you embrace me or make me brokenhearted, I will continue to serve you. That I don't have an agenda to try to get something out of this relationship. And so it can be kind of risky. It takes some courage there, because one could be like, well, what are you getting out? What are you getting out of this, doing this for all these years? What are you getting out of it? And from the external materialistic point of view, people may say like, what are you really getting out of this? But for the one who understands the wealth of service to God, they know that it can't be explained to someone who hasn't experienced it. And so it's something very, it's very wonderful, this expression of love, of selfless service. So that is actually the ultimate good for the self. So I liked what you were saying. I liked the point that you brought up. It's actually to really care for oneself, to really nourish oneself on the soul platform, is to come to that platform of serving without this agenda to try to just, I'm going to do this, but as long as I get these, gifts back.
Yes.
Which is okay. If one is going to God to, hey, I need to win the soccer game. I hope my salary next year is better. I hope we get some sunny days, whatever, all right,
Yeah.
better to go to God to get something than not go to God.
Right.
So that's a good step. Please give. But even more is like a parent, right? We might go to God like, hey, mom, give me this. Hey, dad, give me this. But then to relate to the Lord in the mood of how can I give? How can I care for you? Almost like becoming the parent of God, meaning that, that affection of a parent caring for the child without any salary. Yeah. I mean, the hours and hours that a parent gives in raising a child, we can't put a price on that.
So Anne asked the question, and I'm sorry, David, go ahead. Yes.
I have another commitment, so I have to leave, but I love that answer. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks
David,
for coming, David.
David, real quick too, just in a few seconds here, this point of equality, not that we are God, we are Krishna, but we're a unit of consciousness. So just like a palm full of ocean water, the quality is the same as the ocean, but in quantity, it's a part of the whole. So we never become that whole. We're always a unit. We're always a part and parcel. In quality, we're the same, but we're eternally a servant. And so that's the difference aspect.
Very good. Very good.
David, Rumi, I'll leave you with Rumi, since we don't have any Rumi representatives here, but he speaks of, we're not the ocean, but we are the entire ocean in a drop. So
beautiful.
I think that's a way of capturing what you're seeking and asking. And until next time, David, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to leave. Okay.
No, thanks, David. Thanks.
Pleasure to meet you.
Anne asked about.
I'm gonna grab my charger here. So you can carry on. I just have to get my charger so I don't
Okay.
suddenly drop out of this wonderful Sangha.
So Anne asked while you're getting your charger, Anne
Yes.
asked if it's just selfless service, period. Do you have petitions in your prayers? And if so, how is that? I'm adding to the question, but I think this is what she meant. How is petitionary prayer selfless service? So,
I'm gonna ask for you to repeat that shortly, because
okay.
that was not a shallow question. It's a very, very inspiring,
Yeah.
very inspiring
We,
group.
we have a principle in Judaism in what is called, it's a teaching in our legal text. It's a special legal text called Pirkei Avot or Pirkei Avos. It's an ethical legal text. It's unique among our legal texts. And in there, in the first chapter, it speaks of not being a servant or serving your master for the sake of receiving a reward. You were speaking of selfless service. Anne asked, since that's the ideal, do you have petitionary prayers in your prayer practice? And if so, how is petitioning God selfless, since we're petitioning for our own needs?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Pretty much.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay. I'm just give me 1 minute here. Sorry for this. When it comes to technology and these areas.
The first question that Sherry asked me was, did I set up the Zoom and the computer all by myself, or did Yael help me? And I said, I did it this time myself. So we're in the same boat here, bro.
Okay. All right.
Okay. We see your beauty. Yes.
All right. Am I connecting okay here?
Yeah. There's a hand on but I think that's just been there. So don't worry.
Okay. I'm just trying to get this set up here. All right. Petitioning the Lord seems to be, how did you phrase that question? When we petition?
Her question was, if the goal, the ideal, the derech in Hebrew, the way, the practice, the sadhana is selfless service, simple devotion to the divine. Our practice is our greatest wealth. How then can we have petitions, or do you have petitionary prayer one? And then my follow-up on that, which I think Anne meant, was, if you have petitions in your prayer, how is that then selfless? Because it involves self.
Good. So yeah, within self, yeah. So selfless isn't a denial or erasing of the self. For example, in this Maha Mantra, the petition is, "Oh my Lord, how please engage me." So petitioning, please engage me in your loving service. So this is kind of the essence of this Maha Mantra, this Hare Krishna mantra. Now there are mantras where we're petitioning for good health, we're petitioning for protection, we're petitioning for maybe certain gains of this world, which isn't necessarily it's a wrong thing. But when it comes to going deeper in that loving relationship, in that bhakti, then the petition is, how maybe please accept me, please engage me in your loving service. So that petitioning is involving self, and side by self petitioning that, may I be of selfless service, may I be of, how to say, unmotivated, uninterrupted. So yeah, we use these words like unmotivated, selfless. So it's not so much that there's no motivation, but meaning that, again, there's not this agenda that I'm petitioning for something just for my material aggrandizement, for my particular, you can say, superficial needs, which is fine. And at the same time, as we go deeper and deeper, to come to that point of just giving of one's heart, giving of oneself in service, and to experience the joy and fulfillment. Even if we're not there, one can be in the mood of aspiration. I'm aspiring. I'm an aspiring, I'm an aspiring servant. And it's so beautiful to hear about surrender and devotion and dedication and pure love of God. I don't have it. I'm not experiencing that. And at the same time, it's such an attractive, you can say gati, sharanagati, that destination of surrender, that param gati, that supreme destination. Wow, it's so wonderful and so attractive. Please engage me on that path.
Could you say, and then I'm going to get to you, Faye. Could you say, well, first explain for us, because I know there's some differences in Buddhism and in Hindu thought, the notion of self. You do have a self in Hinduism,
Yeah.
an essential being. So could a lower self, a higher self, an essential self, could our service start off within a place of self, but through that service encounter essential self that in some way becomes selfless?
Yes, for sure. For example, before one, maybe at least for my upbringing, I wasn't raised with religion. So in high school, I remember like after I'd go surfing. So I'd go surfing very much like it's a very sensual experience with nature. And it's kind of where things were starting to open up for me as far as God and nature and the grandeur of creation. But then after I'd go surfing, I would spend like an hour picking up trash on the beach. And I would feel really good. I would feel really good about like picking up the trash and making the beach look nicer.
Yeah.
And then as time went on, different kinds of charity work, I went on this protest walk. So, or maybe, one opens up a hospital or one, does some kind of feeding. Now, sometimes that charity, it may be done because it's still kind of centered around like, it feels good to me. And that's a positive start because the act of sacrifice is starting. Whether we're doing some sacrifice for our country, for our community, for our family, for the beach, for the ocean, for the redwoods, for the rainforests, some act of sacrifice, whether it's physically, whether it's financial, at least something is starting, right? Just like there's a story of a holy person, of a sadhu, and this person was quite envious and was making fun and criticizing them and said, "Here, just take these ashes." And then the sadhu, the holy person, said, "Oh, how wonderful, you started your giving." Like, you started your giving. And so he took it as like, all right, start with like giving some ashes to me. And then maybe by next year, he'll give him some bread and milk or something. But so I liked really what you said. It may start kind of on a little platform that may not be necessarily Shuddha, pure. At the same time, start the giving. Even if it means picking up some trash on the beach. It may not have any connection to God. It's just like, hey, it just feels right to do. And I'm giving myself to something more than just going to the beach and riding some waves. I want to do something for the greater good of the environment.
Thank you. Faye, we see you.
Okay. Hi everybody, and hi Krishna. The thing for me is my neighborhood in Chicago was used to be very, very, very Jewish, and then they got old and were dying off and moved their businesses. And who moved in to West Rochester Park, Chicago, Illinois? There was a big immigration wave from India and Pakistan. And I knew nothing about India or Hinduism, so I started to make friends, and people act as if people who are Hindu are idol worshippers, which is a bad thing. And I want to say that in my experience, my Hindu neighbors were the warmest, the friendliest, the kindest, the most helpful. And I don't know if you know, Joe, but what, tell me, Krishna, outside North Calcutta is a Jewish city, and I forgot the name of it. But when Israel would be under attack and people could get on the ship, they would go to that city in India above Calcutta. Am I right? You know what I'm talking about here, Krishna? And so I think, what is it in Hinduism where the people truly get love and brotherhood?
Mm. Beautiful. Well, you just kind of unpacked this verse that I mentioned earlier, that the perfect yogi, the perfect devotee, the perfect practitioner, in comparison to oneself, sees a true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress. So meaning that not just, it's a good start to see one's family as brothers and sisters and parents and our neighbors and community. It's a good start because that's where we start to, that's like on the ground, it's tangible, right? Within my community, with one another. And from there, it will, it will expand and radiate out further and further. But in order for it to radiate out further and further within our own neighborhood, as you just beautifully shared, that in comparison to myself as a soul, I see the true equality of all beings, that I'm connected to others, all living entities, all sentient beings. And yes, I don't have the potency to have that connection. I'm not God. At the same time, in my own small circles, I start to experience this mood of service, seeing my associates around me as brothers and sisters that I can grow with, even in conflict, seeing that as an opportunity for growth. And then that expands out further and further and further. So as you beautifully shared, just within your neighborhood, the warmth, the love. And so this is culture, this is Dharma. So those who are on the path of Dharma will naturally be attracted to this principle of reflecting on oneself in relationship to others in both their happiness and distress. And that's yoga. One can stretch like a Circus du Soleil acrobat. One can do so many mystical acts, and one can recite perfect Sanskrit or whatever tradition you're coming from, whether it's Latin or Hebrew or Greek. One can memorize all kinds of scripture. And so Krishna doesn't say the perfect yogi is an expert in Sanskrit or ritual or able to do some stretches or deep breathing exercises. The perfect yogi is exactly what you're saying, how to bring warmth within our relationship with one another as brothers and sisters. That this is actually to show that we're a yogi, because the exercises and the mantras and the rituals and the kind of scholarly presentation, that can be learned. But to have a simple expression of love for one another in a neighborhood, that's deep. That's reality. That's bhakti. When we start to experience one another in a God-centered way, that we're all brothers and sisters under the care of our Supreme Father.
Thank you. Thank you, Faye, and thank you, Krishna. You mentioned reality. We've mentioned God being in the essence of God's being, infinite, beyond. What is I'd like a few terms, and then we'll get into, again, a few more nuanced aspects of Hindu thought. But we're speaking here of ultimate reality and the divine. What role does Maya play in that? Because Maya is the world of illusion. And in some systems, everything is Maya. There is no reality ultimately. It's all deception and illusion. How does Hinduism, that's a Sanskrit term, how does Hinduism work with ultimate reality and Maya within that, with illusion within that? And then maybe if you could discuss, since Faye brought up quote unquote idolatry, why don't you go into a little bit about, now we'll get a little more specific, about the nature of God or the Godhead or the multiplicity of gods within your tradition and maybe also a little bit within Hindu thought. So I can repeat it if anything was forgotten. It was a longer question than I intended.
Okay. All right. Wow. Yeah, these are profound. So Maya Shakti, the shadow, the the illusion. So in the Bhakti tradition, there are different disciplines where some will say uh, every called Mayavadi means that everything is illusion. Um, everything is one. So sometimes a classic thing is, well, if everything is illusion, everything is one. Hey Joe, next time I see you, I'm just gonna grab your wallet in your car because it's all one. It's all illusion. There's no you or me. So I'm just gonna take a few of your credit cards, take your car, and maybe even your house, because it's all one. And so it's not so practical. So in Bhakti, the illusion is that it's the understanding of the illusion is that it's temporary. It's asat, achid. So in this world, temporary, illusory, and nirananda, the bliss is very flickering. There's a sensation of happiness. There's a sensation of existence and knowledge. But within the material realm, within the material existence, everything is temporary. That's the illusion. For example, the classic example is like a hallucination. Someone takes some kind of drug and they start to hallucinate, but it's not permanent. It's not permanent. Or similarly, one experiences a certain phase of life, and then 20 years later, that experience, like where did it go? So it's a very illusory chanchala. It's a very flickering, uh, so-called pleasure, so-called reality that we live in, and that it's temporary. That's the illusion. And the Maya Shakti is so powerful that she's this powerful energy. She's, basically that superintendent, that Durga, this goddess of this material manifestation, such a potency that we think we got it down. And once we think we got it down, it's kind of like we're caught in the web. And so to think that we can fool Maya or we can fool the illusory energy there's no way. It's kind of like crossing an insurmountable ocean. And that insurmountable ocean of Maya, the material energy, becomes like the size of a calf's hoof print when one surrenders to God's will. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi. Maya, that divine energy, this divine Maya, Daivi Hesha Gunamayi, made up of the stringent laws of nature, of the modes of nature, is very difficult to overcome. Maya Daivi Hesha Gunam Mama Maya Duratya, very difficult to cross this ocean. Mam Evaye Papadente, Mayam Etam Tarantite, but one who has surrendered unto me can easily cross over it. So that without that surrender, without that connection and grace of God, grace of Krishna, then very insurmountable, this potency of Maya.
I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
So Durga is, you can say, the personification. Durga team. Durga means a fortress, or kind of like Alcatraz, right? Like this fortress, very difficult to get out of. So this material manifestation is Durga. It's Durga team, very difficult to get out of.
Is Durga the goddess of death?
Goddess of the material energy. Yeah.
Material energy. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe, it's interesting, speaking of that connection that we're all seeking in life, but we're connecting ultimately, if I'm hearing you right, we're connecting to that which is illusory, which is Maya. And yet we're trying to connect with something enduring, which is really temporary. And that's why we're always, ultimately, if we're connecting to that which is temporary, we're never going to have that deep connection with the enduring or with transcendence.
Beautifully said. And it's not that the endeavors and pursuits of this world are necessarily wrong. It's just when that connection isn't there. So for example, I mean, just like there's amazing athletes and amazing musicians and artists, and if it's only that, then at the time of death, everything is taken away. None of that we can take with us. The tennis rackets aren't going to come with us, the soccer ball, the political seat, the political power, the beauty, just like, yeah, we may in our teens and 20s and 30s, the bodies are in a certain way, and then we're in our 60s and the bodies has changed. And if we're dependent only on the external circumstances, it can be very depressing when those things are taken away. Or if one is no longer an Oscars winner or the supermodel or the famous athlete. So the illusion is that I'm banking on that as like my fulfillment versus fulfillment from within. If we're banking on the externals fulfillment, it's very thin. It's like a very thin porcelain vase. All it takes is one little movement and it shatters, and that reality is shattered. And we see it, right? It's a no-brainer. We see so many circumstances with people who have fame and power and intelligence and prestige, and if they're not connected to God, those positions are very temporary. And in fact, the misery can even almost be can be more devastating when those are taken away.
Beautiful. And so Faye had mentioned we often associate Indian thought, certainly with polytheism, and we even had a brief conversation not too long ago about polytheism versus monotheism and imagery, idols, images.
Yes.
Could you briefly describe the plurality of the Godhead within the Hindu understanding? And my understanding of Vaishnavism is that it is monotheistic in its essence, but pluriform in its manifestation? Or is there a nuance that I'm missing, that those forms are also somewhat divine in themselves?
Yeah, beautifully expressed. In the ancient Brahma Samhita, in these hymns, there's a verse, Diparchireva hidashantaram abhyupetya. Dipayate means candle. Diparchireva hidashantaram abhyupetya. Dipayate vivirita hetu samana dharma yastadrige vahichvishnitaya vibhati govindamali purushantamaham bhajami. So the essence of this verse is, just like one candle is there, and that one candle may light many, many other candles. And within those candles, the same potency is there, yet they originated from one candle.
Okay.
So the avatars and expansions of Krishna, of God. And when we say Krishna, we refer to, the Supreme. So however we, walk the Great Spirit, Yahweh, Elohim, the Godhead, the transcendence. That's the understanding. So yes, that one candle, and yet unlimited manifestations of that one source.
And let's, a few more questions. Karma.
Yes.
And our relationship and reincarnation.
Yes.
In
real quick too, Joe, in the Vedic paradigm, when we hear of Ganesh, Shiva, Durga, these are all administrators. They're administrators, within the material cosmic manifestation. So they're not necessarily the Godhead. They're empowered administrators in the functions of the material creation: the moon, the sun, the wind, the water, the earth. Just all the unlimited variety of elements and aspects of this material cosmic manifestation. Those are all as administrators, empowered by divinity, empowered by Krishna, by God, to do the works within this material world. So they're called devas.
Are they eternal?
They are
by
not
nature? They're not eternal. Okay.
Well, they're eternal as much as we are eternal.
Okay.
As much as we are eternal, but their position, they have you can say a longevity, and they exist on a higher dimensional realm. So that goes a little into the esoteric aspects of beings within the different. Anyways, it's a whole other area, and I don't want to
Next
go into it
time.
right now.
Next
Yeah,
time. All
yeah,
right. So now give us a little insight into karma, a little
right.
understanding of reincarnation, which certainly affects karma effects, and then we'll see what kind of time we have left for the next few
Okay,
questions or questions from our community.
okay. So karma, the unique quality of this word karma, and then next month maybe with Krishna Bhagavan, he'll unpack the Sanskrit a little bit more. But karma is both action and the subsequent reaction. So the importance of understanding karma is that it invokes radical responsibility. If one understands the laws of karma, then things like blaming others and complaining and acting irresponsibly, all those things will be kind of checked, because if I'm radically responsible, that means whatever I've done, I'm accountable for, and whatever I'm doing now, I'm accountable for. And so whatever's unfolding, whatever's fructifying in my life, it's due to some things I've done. And whatever I'm doing now, there will be also a subsequent reaction. So it brings a sense of mindfulness, a sense of radical responsibility in how I engage my mind, body, words in relationship to the environment around me. And so if one understands karma, then naturally they're going to want to act in a way that's going to be progressive. And then the highest karma is called Naish karma. Naish karma means where one is in the current of doing the divine will, so there's no more karma. And then there's vikarma. Vikarma means harsh, destructive, violent works. So it's also activity, but very much on the darker, lower modes, destructive quality. And then there's karma, pious activity according to religious principles. And then there's naish karma or akarma, where one is moving in this world, but simply as an instrument for the divine will.
Wow. So karma affects our next incarnation, yes?
Our next moment,
Our next moment, okay.
it can affect our next moment too. Also our next journey after the time. So meaning that within this lifetime, we're going through many stages of experience. And in the time of death, it's a transition. Dehinosminyata dehe komaram. So whatever yam yam vapi smaram bhavam smaram, whatever I'm thinking at the time of death, then that will carry, and how I've lived like my life, that will carry me into my next destination. So if one at the time of death has lived a life in dedication to the Lord, by the grace of God and by one's dedication, then one potentially attains the spiritual realm. If one has lived a life of great forgetfulness, then their curriculum may continue to extend within this correctional facility, which we call the material creation. Durga, this material creation is with bars or without bars. We're kind of all in a correctional facility going through our curriculum, like School of Hard Knocks.
So what do we do if karmic consequences affect us? Our lives are affected by our actions. That's our karma. When we see, this isn't a new question, I'm sure. When we see a person in our next incarnation or in this life who is in a state of real suffering, grief, pain, are we to look at them as reaping the consequences of a previous life's actions of, as you said, forgetfulness, of harshness? And if so, how do we still have in our hearts compassion? Because if they did so wrong in that life, this is just the natural consequence or the fruits of their action. How can we still, if that is that a correct understanding? And if so, how do we maintain compassion for a person that we see in such a tragic state? They're still human.
Yes. So karma can be very much misused and misrepresented when it results in callousness and lack of empathy. As Krishna is saying, the true yogi is on that level of empathy. So for example, I'll just bring it home to the home front. You know, I go skateboarding with my son, and sometimes he falls and he gets a little injured, and I can just sit there saying, "That's your karma." No, I'm like, you know, I'm like running over, and because I know when the fall is just like, okay, he's okay. But if I'm standing there and he falls and I know it's like that one hurt, then I just beeline, I'm there. And I'm not like, well, you know, this is your karma, bye. And like, yeah, you must have done something and you're falling, and yeah, just like suck it up, you know. Of course not. Any thoughtful parent with a little ounce of heart is there, right? We make a be, you know, you have your daughter, and all of us have experience where we're there to show support and care. Now, we may not be able to fix the whole world, and it brings weight to the heart. So therefore, the prayer in bhakti is swastyasta vishvasya, universe, the whole creation. May there be good fortune, swasti. May there be good fortune for all living beings, and may everyone give up their envy for one another, and develop a peaceful mind by practicing devotion. So yes, we want to care for others, and side by side, so as to not become suicidal and hopeless, to understand that, all right, we're all going through some curriculum. We're all going through a curriculum, and to understand that this is, as painful it is, we live in this realm. Coming into this realm, we've turned away from that divine will. And, you know, whether it's falling off a skateboard or dealing with economic issues, I mean, just there's so much calamities going on around in the world, individually and collectively. And it can be so depressing, and even to the point of like, why would I even want to exist in this place? So to also understand that there's some curriculum that's going on due to the desires of the living entities, and what can I also do in my own small way to bring relief to that suffering, to that suffering. And you mentioned karma. It's very interesting because collective karma is very interesting, because when there's very aggressive, violent behavior happening, then many times we'll see, like for example, this right now, along with humans, the earth, you know, the rainforests and the creatures, there's so much destruction. There's such an energy of destruction and exploitation and just violence. It's very, very intense. So when we see imbalances in nature, like when Mother Nature sneezes, it may be in the form of a hurricane or a tornado, or when she cries, it may be in the form of a tsunami. And so we sometimes say the cruel hands of material nature, and then next moment we'll be in Costa Rica or on the mountains of Colorado saying, wow, the beauty and grace and serenity of Mother Nature, just the gentle 70-degree day, the beautiful Rockies. And so we'll say, oh, the beautiful, gentle hands of material nature. And then there can be another instance somewhere, the cruel hands of Mother Nature, the you know, the violent storms, etc. So I'm bringing this up because even on the collective level with the environment, we're seeing kind of karmic, you can say, reactions going on. And that's this is the curriculum of this material existence that we live in. And so therefore, these kind of gatherings, coming together in what we call sangha, when we come together in sangha and bring and invoke the presence of God in sangha, this is the most needed frontline activism. According to the Bhakti tradition, this is the activism that is needed in this world. You know, saving the rainforests are important. People for ethical treatment of animals is important. Feeding the poor. There's so many, you know, saving the dolphins. So on all humanitarian and environmental, animal rights, there's so many branches and branches. We would say those are all important. And the most radical activism is to come together and invoke the presence of God into our lives and into our communities and service. And that will start to bring about a sense of shanti, or peace, and in harmony. Otherwise, trying to fix all those things is compared to like watering the leaves of a tree. If we're watering the leaves, it's a nice sentiment, but we're forgetting about the root. we're forgetting about the roots. So this coming together, what we call sangha, it waters that root. So then as we go into our areas, into our branches and our leaves, those will naturally be nourished because we're watering the root.
Beautiful. I want you to leave us with, our time is up. I had a few more questions. If you could leave us with, it's probably the worst question. Give me a 1-minute answer to the purpose of life in your tradition. How's that for a bomb that I'm dropping? Give us a sense of the purpose of life. And there are so many beautiful rituals in your tradition, but the Maha Mantra is a gift. I mean, that is a sadhana, that is a practice that really is, that brings wealth, inner wealth. I've heard it, I've seen it. Could you just give us a 1-minute explanation, really? And I'm sorry, maybe I should just skip that. If you want to skip that, just leave us with the Maha Mantra, which will call all of us, which the great chant, beautiful chant, and it's ever present at your service. It's in your life. It's ever present in your life. Leave us with that after you answer, if you feel you can, with one purpose in life at least, and then leave us with that great, grand, holy chant of the Maha Mantra one time, and we'll all be blessed.
Well, as you were asking that question, Rabbi Joe, just what came to my heart. So I'm just going to share what just started to flow into my heart.
Yeah.
Is be a gardener, a spiritual gardener, cultivating the field of the heart, cultivating the human spirit. And the purpose is to keep watering that devotional creeper. And what came to my mind is this beautiful verse, the Bhakti Lata, that this creeper, this plant of devotion is growing in the heart. And the purpose is to continue watering that plant so it grows and grows and grows and grows and stays at the feet of the Lord. And cultivate the human spirit, be that spiritual gardener.
Beautiful, beautiful. Leave us with your Maha Mantra, with the great chant that would heal the world.
All right. So I'll sing it once through with a little melody.
Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Amen.
Thank you, Joe.
And
Thank
amen.
you, Joe,
And thank you.
Thank you for welcoming me. I feel so honored and touched by this community today on this Zoom call, and just the heartfelt, and David left earlier, David, just so thoughtful reflections and questions. And yeah, I just feel very connected, and I feel such a warm welcome. It really made my evening. I was a little nervous, honestly. I'm not, a great Vedic scholar. I was a little nervous. But Joe, you're giving me a good stretch to get out of my comfort zone. So I appreciate you as a friend and brother to support me in my growth in my personal practice. So thank you, and to the rest of you.
Thank you for engaging us in your loving service, which is
Thank you,
beautiful.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Till next time, folks.
Tushta, Krishna Das, and Rabbi, thank you both so much for doing this tonight, for being here with us. That was amazing. That was really beautiful. I so appreciate both of you. And I look forward, to more conversations.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Sherry. Thank you, Sherry, for holding the space that you do.
Come back, Krishna. You're not finished yet, baby.
All right. Well, with your welcoming words, I look
Yes.
forward to staying connected. Thank you.
Amen. Beautiful. Until next time, folks, bless you all.
Thank you, Rabbi Joe. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, everybody.